in the movement. So it means a lot. It means a lot to have this happening tonight in a space that means a lot that we're all here. It is my job to invite Tony Michelle Williams onto the stage. Tony Michelle is a multifaceted professional known for her roles as a performance artist, creative director, and embodied leadership coach. In addition to her artistic talents, she holds the esteemed position of co-founder and executive director of Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative Aid. Tony Michelle seamlessly combines her creative prowess with her activism, utilizing supernatural grace and a sense of sacred silliness as tools to unlock joy and satisfaction. And I'm sure that many of you know SNAPCO's work, many of you may be members of SNAPCO, but I travel to other parts of the country and talk to trans people in other parts of the country, and they say Atlanta and East Point are doing transformative work, and that's all due to SNAPCO.
Yeah.
So, yes. SNAPCO has changed the game in terms of organizing, in terms of changing how people talk about policing in regard to trans people. And Tony Michelle is such a huge part of that. So to all of you who participated in that work, thank you. And put your hands together for Tony Michelle.
Welcome. Tonight is such a marvelous night. Welcome to a wonderful evening to and with our very own Raquel Willis. I'm so excited to be with her and our friends, our community at large, but most importantly, our mamas and our family. Yes. To celebrate all of the hard work that Raquel has been doing. We're going to talk a little bit about her book, The Risk It Takes to Bloom. And if you are a Black person, if you are a woman, if you are trans, if you are queer, you know what it means to put your life on the line in order to be seen, full of your dignity, and most importantly, safe where you belong. On life, in life, we're really blessed to have people who love us, who find us, and who we find to celebrate all of our joy, all of our grief, all of our pain, all of our turn-ups and twerks and celebrations. And I've been able to find a few of those folks, 2 women, Raquel and Angelica, to do that with in my lifetime. So give them a round of applause. And also, most importantly, is to be in sisterhood. If you haven't read the book yet, please do. I'm sure many of you will get your copies tonight. But before we get into that, I want to invite someone who's going to be ushering us into our conversation tonight. First up again, Angelica Ross. Part in Chicago. Right, we're also the series regular on FX's award-winning franchise. We all know it. Pose. And love an American Horror Story for EP Ryan Murphy. She received rave reviews for her role as Candy in Pose. And Angelica recurred on Claws, which was one of my favorite little moments. So yeah, the Claws. She's an accomplished writer and producer. Angelica is also a leading trans activist and founder of the nonprofit Trans Tech Social Empire. Angelica, through Trans Tech Social Enterprises, Angelica was awarded the Visibility Award for the Human Rights Campaign. She is recently back in Georgia, y'all, and she's taking over the political stage here. And we're so excited and honored to have her. Please welcome to the stage, Angelica Ross. Baby,
You gonna bring my sister up?
I'm about to bring your sister up, but that's what we wanna see. Where we at back here?
Yeah.
All right, and now the moment that we've all been waiting for. Go ahead and just stand on your feet and give love to Raquel Willis. Dedicated to Black trans liberation. She has held groundbreaking posts, including Director of Communications for the Miss Foundation for Women. She was the executive editor of Out Magazine and the national organizer for the Transgender Law Center. She co-founded Transgender Week of Visibility and Action, which many of us, all of us in this room celebrate at some point, with civil rights attorney Chase Strangio, and currently serves as some country. And currently serves as the executive producer for iHeartMedia Outspoken. She's also the president of Snapchat. Also involved as she is a part of the WNBA Social Justice Council member. We're all here with her and for her tonight. So as loud as you can. Welcome home, Raquel. Everybody.
Well, what a journey this must have been for you. You know, my driver on the way here was a little late. We weren't sure we were gonna get here on time, but we did get here on time. And he asked me, you know, where I was going, and I was telling him that I was coming here to do a conversation with the author who just released a book, and I told her name. And he was like, oh, she must be a big deal. And I was like, you have no idea. So for those who don't know, you know, and I know you have a lot of friends and family in the audience, your story begins right here in Georgia, in Athens, Georgia. Now, were you Augusta? Listen, it's a lot of A's in Georgia. Were you the type of, were growing up, were you the person who claimed Atlanta, or did you claim?
Oh, no, too far out for that. Augusta cannot claim Atlanta and not be, you know, taken down a couple notches. So.
Gotcha. So how does, because now you've gone from a small town to a big city, living in New York. How does it feel being back? I saw something on your Twitter just saying that,
Oh,
like,
Lord.
you were seeing like Trump signs or just different things. Like, how does it feel being back?
Yeah, well, to your point, when my mom and I were driving to Athens yesterday, we saw some signs that said, repent, Jesus is coming. And, you know, that felt cozy because I'm used to it. No, but I always feel an electric sense of energy when I'm in the South, no matter where it is, whether it's here in Georgia, of course, my home, or New Orleans or Texas. It's just something different about the South, and I claim it. And I really had to work through a lot to understand the power of the South, because I think growing up here, especially if you are any kind of different or on the margins, you kind of absorb this idea that like you have to leave to find yourself or to find some kind of liberation in your life. And honestly, it was Athens, meeting queer and trans folks there, and coming to Atlanta and specifically being a part of Black, queer, and trans community that was like, oh no, honey, we got all the ingredients here.
Now that you have all the ingredients, I want to, so how have you been back? So you've been back to Augusta?
I've been to Augusta a few times, yeah, since.
How does the environment embrace you? How does it respond to you being back in the environment?
You know, I think it's interesting. I think I sometimes have like a metropolitan or northern stank on me now. You know, so when I come back, I think it's a little different. I think it's also different too, because when I was living in Augusta, of course, I wasn't moving through the world in my power as a trans woman. So I only know what that experience is like from not being there, right? I think in Athens it's a little different because when mom and I were there yesterday, my mom was in the front row, so shout out to mom. Shout out. Yeah, so much of my family, aunts, cousins, my sister, other sisters, are here, so thank y'all for showing up. But yeah, when mom and I were in Athens, yesterday, I mean, just to see that the queerness, the transness lives on is beautiful, right? Like we had a very queer trans contingent when I was at UGA. But you know, more and more folks continue to come. So it was powerful yesterday too.
So let's talk about this. Let's break into this. So I do have this pretty copy of this book. Yeah, you can take a photo. But my real book is this one right here that's got, you know, the dog ears and the things in it and the highlights and stuff like that. So I just want to kind of go back, and I want to go back to your childhood. And I want to go back to sort of growing up with your father in the house. How was, you know, you write about like sort of trying to live up to your father's ideals in the beginning. Like, how was that relationship? Because you talked about your mother being very sort of accepting and being like that, but how was the relationship?
Yeah, well, we had a very beautiful, warm family. Like my family was very close knit. There weren't really cares in the world, right? Kind of on the surface. And I think that that's true for a lot of queer and trans folks. Is like, even if there are so many stars that have aligned, so many of our families and our parents are not necessarily equipped to understand our queerness or our transness or our difference, right? And so you can have all of these beautiful kind of pros to your experience, but I think with my dad was loving, and a lot of his correction came out of love. So there was, I think, for him kind of a sense that I'm a little different in some way, and that he needed to do a little bit more to kind of butch me up in a sense, which is so funny because that was one of his nicknames. But I think with that, there was a tension. And as I got older and started to understand my queerness, came out as gay in high school, he didn't really know what to do with that, right? And so we figured out in some ways how to move through it. And I'm glad we did, because later on, of course, he passed away when I was 19.
So yeah, actually, since we were there, I want to talk about that, because that's like, it was just one of the most beautiful scenes, like just reading it. And you know, reading about you and your siblings coming into the room, just how your mother held it together for everyone. And just the guilt maybe that you felt about the time that you lost, that you weren't there on the weekends when you were going to school, or that even the time that you talked about going back while your mom was still dealing with all of that. What, looking back in hindsight in that moment, you talk about both, you talk about this dichotomy of not having your father there, but also not having to live up to his idea of you. You know, it was this kind of both and. Can you talk about what you learned from that moment of losing your father in that moment?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess to kind of go back a little bit, when I went off to school at the University of Georgia, I found queer trans community, as I said, and I found drag. So drag performance was a huge part of my life in college. And
was it Mr. Sister, Sister, Mr.?
We got some aliases in there, so y'all got straight to me, y'all. But yeah, I mean, I was a part of a troupe where I really was like, you know, the only trans woman in the mix, and it was an interesting experience. But I think drag gave me a sense of freedom that I didn't have in my everyday life. It gave me a chance to kind of play with gender. It was like my playground of sorts, and I needed that to start kind of trying to figure out the calculus that was my identity. But as I was doing that, of course, I lost my father, and I had now this new secret of, drag performance, gender nonconformity that I had been hiding from him. And through the mourning and the grieving process, I initially felt a sense of disappointment, I guess, in myself, and shame and guilt, because I worried about destroying his legacy. There's such a huge dynamic in Black families, and particularly around Black masculinity when it comes to legacy. And in my relationship with my father, my father was like upstanding, intelligent, strong man, a figure in community and in our neighborhood and in our family, and on and on. And I think me being queer and being trans, I had learned, not necessarily explicitly from him or even my family, but from society, and I think also the reaction from my peers, that my queerness and my transness was a strike against me. And in that mourning of him, I had to come to an understanding that in some ways there was a lesson in his passing. And the lesson was that life is too short, and I needed to figure out what my path was. And also, I needed to be able to relinquish his expectations with him. And I was freed up to kind of understand my transness and my womanhood.
You also talked about learning from your mother in that moment, and the ways in which, you talk about, and I highlighted this in this book, where you talked about how, as Black women, oftentimes we are holding the space for everybody. And we know that we cannot break because folks are looking to us to go on, to take care. And so you spoke about a strength that your mother had in that space. What lessons, that's one of them, but what lessons have you learned from your mother?
From my mom. Oh, so many. I guess I would start, but I feel like it's important to make this point. I think that there are a lot of incorrect thoughts around how trans women in particular come to our identities. My understanding of womanhood was never anything shallow. It was never anything performative. I knew strong women throughout my life, whether it was my mom or my grandma Inez, who I talk about in the book, and my sister Jessica, and so many others who are also here in the audience. Womanhood was an important pillar of our family. There was strength there. And I think with my mom, I really respected the fact that she held court in a way. So even when I was trying to figure out my queerness, she would carve out space for me to do that privately, in a sense. And so I could talk to her about what I was going through, even before I could tell my dad, right? Like, honestly, there was a bit of a strategy in coming out to her first, because I was like, I needed somebody on my side. So I told my dad. And so that was her power. And then I think also, even later when I came to my transness, my mom has been the one who has most educated family when I wasn't in the room, demanded that I be respected. And I know that not everyone in our community, most people in our community don't have that. And she continues to be that, especially for, we all got our older relatives, honey, that don't get everything. And my mom is the one that's like, Raquel, that's my daughter.
Thank you so much for that one. You mind asking a question? Just one question.
Yes.
You do mind?
No.
I'm just gonna come in person. Do you mind just having a seat with me on the edge of this stage?
Yes.
So I just asked Raquel about, what she has learned from you. One thing that I feel like has been the greatest gift for me and my mom is finally having this relationship where we realize we've been learning from each other.
Definitely.
What are some things that you've learned from Raquel?
To listen. You have to listen. I'm an educator, like she said. But I've been a mom now for 44 years.
See now?
I've been a mom for 44 years. I don't take it for granted. I'm still a mom. I'll always be a mom. But I learned that I need to listen more. Listen and truly listen. Because I've learned so much from Raquel. I've been transitioning too. And it's like this, I'm learning new vocabulary. I'm just learning how to just continue to be me, but also be able to coexist comfortably and allow my daughter and her family, her community, our community, to just continue to thrive and allow them to be able to grow and be comfortable in the world. People are trying to always make others feel uncomfortable and trying to discard people. We can't do that. We're all human. God made us all. And the word too that comes to mind is love, L-O-V-E. If you truly love someone, it's unconditional. God didn't say, love thy neighbor as thyself, but peel away that which you don't, is not like you. We're all different, and I appreciate differences. I love differences. If we were all the same, this would be a boring world. I appreciate differences. I love differences. And I love my daughter. I love people. I love everybody. Love is the word too.
Give it up for Raquel.
Oh, you come from such good DNA, look at that skin.
Thank you.
Everything. So when it came to, when it comes to you coming into your own and as a trans person, I recently did a visit over to Lene's parking lot, the Lene that does the pimping, parking lot pimping. And one of the points that I brought up is that, growing up in our families, if you're gay or trans or anything like that, they want to tell you, just don't talk about it. And then I also said, well, then we all sitting at the table, not talking about the things that we should be talking about, because whether you're trans or not, growing up, many times we've had to sit at a Thanksgiving table or a Christmas table next to someone who has hurt us. And it's, a lot of times what I see I've been seeing this on social media, as the holidays are coming up and people are gathering together, and I think a lot of times folks from our community, we don't align with the criminal justice system. We want restoration. We want to feel restored. You speak in your book about a time of having to go through, when you were really young, a time of I would say sexual abuse, or an incident, we'll say an incident. And a lot of times when that happens in somebody that's queer trans life, the last thing we want, we will never, it's like hard to tell someone that we've ever been through anything, because we don't want someone to associate that with my identity. And so in your book, you talk about burying that incident because you didn't want to. How was the process for you of revisiting that space as you wrote this?
Yeah. Woo. Okay. Yeah, so I talk about in the first chapter, one of the kind of first noticings of my difference was through an experience of what I would call violation, sexual violation, physical violation by a peer in Augusta. And I think the burying it was a coping mechanism, because especially in the 90s, I mean, what we heard about being gay or being trans was like something had to happen to you. You know, if it wasn't that our glorious queerness and transness was some kind of birth defect, which was some of what we were absorbing at that time, it was that something happened to you that made you that way. And I knew very young that I didn't want to be seen in that way. And I knew that my identity, my attraction to boys, you know, when I was in grade school, wasn't simply a result of that incident. If anything, the incident was maybe a sort of awakening for me that, like, yes, there was a violation there. Oh, and it's complicated because there's gray areas here and I am attracted to boys. And I think it was important to include that because I think a lot of us have experienced those moments. And
Well, you know, and I want to point that out because when you say a lot of us have might experience those moments, I think that so much of our community, our world, our society has been in denial about the existence of queer and trans, are vocally in denial of it. And yet, they're some of the first ones to recognize it before we do. They're the first ones to either want to bully it out of us or want to actually identify us as someone they can violate.
right.
That's why, to your point. So going beyond that, and then having to figure out your identity. Did it have to wait until you got to college? Is that the I know through the shows and everything, but did you not? I know you got supported in the house, but did you not have any inklings at that time, or did you not feel like you could dive into that space more?
Well, when it came to sexual orientation, like
I don't mean sex, I mean your identity. I mean, as a trans person.
well, yeah, and I mean, I want to kind of share, I think, you know, understanding being gay was something that I first started to understand really through being bullied. And being called that, right? But I think, of course, there was nuance there because there was a femininity that my peers, and usually boys, were kind of trying to like sniff out or they saw, right? For whatever reason, y'all. For whatever reason.
Did mom, because there was a moment your mom said, or you say in the book, your mom's like, I don't think you're gay.
Yeah.
Is it, do you think, cause I feel like maybe she was on to something.
Mom like to think she was on something. I'm not gonna for all that. I think, but I experienced that not just from my mom, but you know, my dad was like, "You're not gay." My grandma would be like, "You're not gay," even when I was adamant and I was like a high schooler, right, like a senior, like, and it was very clear, like. I was look, we got some of my classmates in here saying, you know, I was trying to wear as tight of a shirt as I could, the brightest colors I could find in the boys section, and hip huggers, you know. So I was trying to do what I could do with what I had. And but you know, I think with the gender piece, there wasn't really space to kind of figure that out. It really wasn't until I got to college and of course I found other trans people and, you know, having other trans students explain their experience, I was like,
Especially trans men, because
especially trans
and
men.
in my 44 years, I you know, I grew up around some of the girls who did not have no wear. Like, oh, you think our society don't know that trans men exist? Like, there were just a lot of folks in our own community, even trans women, who just didn't understand that trans men existed. You have such a thorough, I feel like you have such, I guess you have some gender studies class.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't become this insufferable without them.
Because when I associated with, there was a moment in the book you talk about coming home from college, having these gender study courses and whatnot, and then talking a language to the folks around you and them looking at you like you're green, talking about trans misogynoir and, you know, all the different things. Do you think as well being surrounded by trans men, that helped to widen your understanding of gender?
It definitely did. I mean, the gender studies course is, of course, I mean, I was saying this yesterday in Athens, but I was blessed to come into my womanhood alongside coming into my feminism, you know, so there was always kind of this understanding of how femininity is demonized in our society, regardless of who it comes from, right? Kind of regardless of the source. So that was powerful. But I think what I also kind of realized in college was, and this was something that I always felt like I had to do even as a kid, like even when I was trying to come out to my parents, I had to like study, basically like get my own kind of like rinky-dink PhD in like why I'm gay, so that I could even try and bring it up to my parents, because my parents, you know, had advanced degrees. My mom has a doctorate in education, you know. I had to build a case so that my parents, for anything really, but definitely for being gay. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, well, I also grew up very Catholic. What are the religious teachings on this? What does the catechism say? Right, I had to look online and kind of figure those things out. My father had an advanced degree in psychology, so I was reading his DSM. That wasn't helpful. My case. But that was what I had to do. So when I was figuring out my transness in college, it was a similar experience of trying to do research. And luckily the women's and gender studies courses gave me that. But I also just retraced my history, and I remember, of course, not only being called gay as a slur as a kid, but being told I was just like a girl, which is not quite the same. There's a little different kind of flair to that kind of bullying. I also, you know, I had experiences where I was laying in bed praying to God that I would just wake up as a girl at like 9 and 10 years old. That wasn't just a gay experience. That was something more fabulous.
That's a calling.
Yeah, so I had to unbury those things that I had buried. So along with that incident, there was also those moments where I questioned my gender, but because the world told me that that was an unreasonable thing, I couldn't continue to do that, so I had to bury it.
So let me ask you, what for your time, how are we doing? You good on that so far? I don't know, I can't see nobody.
See, the timekeeper's all in it.
Yes, so on the risk it takes to bloom, one of my favorite things as I'm a Buddhist, and one of my favorite things in Buddhism, the symbol is the lotus flower. And we love the lotus flower because in order to like grow, it has to come up through very muddy and murky water. And then to get to the surface and blossom and be unsullied by the environment that it came up in. What would you say are some of the mud, some of the challenges that are part of your foundation?
I think isolation. I think that was a big part of growing up in Augusta, and maybe not growing up in Atlanta, right? Like that's its own particular thing, because there wasn't really queer and trans community I could have tapped into at a young age. I first tapped into community through the internet, you know, for better or worse. So Yahoo chat rooms, teen forums. I needed more guidance there.
Yeah, because the internet was a little wild.
Maybe not quite as sophisticatedly wild as it is now, but it was its own thing. But in those spaces, I at least knew that there were other queer and trans people out there, and I needed to find them wherever that was. I didn't know I was gonna be able to find them in Georgia. You know, that was kind of the beautiful blessing along the way. So I think the isolation was one of those things. And of course, I mean, I think the expectations, I think that's kind of a big part of the risk it takes to bloom is that we're called to shatter expectations at various points in our lives. And we have to get to a point where we can at least take the risk to see, well, maybe there's something better out there than this thing that is hurting me, this thing that is restricting me. And I don't think that that's just a trans thing. Like when I think about cis folks, child, y'all going through it too, right? Y'all might not think y'all are, but like when I think about cis boys and men who are told they literally can't have certain emotions without their masculinity being questioned, or they can't have certain interests. I think of how these restrictive ideas hurt them. You know, I think about cis women and girls who, of course, are facing so many more issues around what they can express, what they can't, whether they can be in control of their own destinies without being attached at the hip to some random man off the street. That is a gender problem, right? And then, of course, trans and non-binary folks give us a glimpse of what's possible when we let all that shit go.
Yeah, you can sound to that, yeah. So you are really young.
Thank you.
Yeah. Listen, because you know, I'm at this point, you know. But, you know, but you are so confident. You are so smart and you are so brave. I read, you know, and I saw, you know, there's this amazing video of you, you know, speaking at the Women's March, you know, and just as a trans person and one of your like, you know, aunties, I'm just so
Big sis.
Yeah, big sis, you know, yeah. I'm so proud of you, but you mentioned in the book how you were having your speech and then, you know, the sound system sort of cuts off and the focus goes somewhere else. Not only just in that moment, but then you also, I know that you have worked at publications where you have been the youngest and, you know, first trans person to be editor at magazines and be the person that had folks listen to and take direction from. And I know folks that have seen the Beyonce film have seen that even if she gets gaslit, that we definitely can get gaslit. So what gives you the courage to stand up in those moments and speak and lead, even when people, I guess, when the space isn't always prepared for your type of leadership?
That was a good question. I love y'all, so talkative. But yeah, I mean, I think that I'm just used to spaces not being ready for me. And I think a lot of us in that room are used to that. And we have to own that we are used to that, because that makes us different. You know, that makes us able to bloom maybe without all the fertilizer that maybe folks with a little bit more privilege have, or a lot of it more privilege. So I'm used to that. And I think what keeps me going is whenever I'm in doubt, I can look to elders, people like Miss Dee Dee Chambly up here in the front. Thank you. Who paved the way with even less and demanded to be heard and seen and respected. And I think about our transcessors, right? I mean, if you don't know, I mean, I hope if you're here, you know that trans people didn't just start existing yesterday. But we've always been here. I mean, whether we're talking about Marsha or Sylvia, and even beyond, demanding to be heard, even when society really wasn't paying attention to us. That keeps me going. And then, of course, I think about all of my peers who I try to elevate as much as I can with my bit of platform and access, because they do so much work that we may see in this room, but the rest of the world ignores. And then I think about the ones coming up. You know, I don't want the next little Black trans, if they even call themselves that, kid to feel isolated in the way that I did.
Well, I'm sure with a book like this, that they will definitely not feel a little less alone. What do you feel, what do you want for people to take away from this book, from the risk it takes to live?
I want folks to understand their inherent power, that it is there, that it's informed by our insecurities, by the ways that we think that we have come up short in this world, that we don't have to accept the path laid out for us, that we can build our own thing. Yeah. And honestly, building your own thing is a glorious revolution.
Absolutely. So I want to go to the audience, right, the audience questions. Go ahead.
I think we're gonna take about 3 questions.
3 questions, okay, we got room for 3 questions.
Okay, come up to the mic.
Come up to the mic.
My God.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm wonderful, what is your name?
Koya.
Sequoia, I have a feeling that you know Raquel.
But I'm trying not to actually very emotional about this.
Well, how do we know each other?
So I'm Sequoia, I'm from Augusta, my classmates right here. And this is the first time meeting Raquel in person. As Raquel.
As Raquel.
And when you were talking about your story, I'm so excited.
Wait, we went to high school together.
Sorry. I think you came in 8th grade.
I came in 8th grade.
And we went through 8th grade to 12th grade together, y'all. We went to a very strange school. It was like a high school musical, but mixed with college prep. So imagine Harvard level education, but you're singing in the halls. Okay. It was like
Somebody else was singing that.
yeah, so that was what we did. And Raquel and I, we had a friendship that did not start in friendship. And you taught me so much. And I'm so proud of you. I said something very hurtful to Raquel, in me and my ignorance, right? And you know what I said. And I know you know what I said. And I knew something was different. And I agree with your mom. We knew you were not gay. We didn't know what it was called. And I remember, and I said I could come to this, I said, I'm gonna tell this story because I don't know if you remember this. I did your makeup, powder puff, junior year. And that was when I met Raquel. I did not know it was Raquel. Raquel has always been there. And I want you to know, class of 09, we have so he was the most famous person for your class. What is this person doing? I'm in research, y'all. I'm in advertising. And the most beautiful thing happened when I was analyzing data on fashion. And I'm looking at competitive ads. And I say, Raquel, and like, and grace in these stages that we knew something was different. I apologize for what I said, but I thank you for having so much grace and compassion for me. And people that just didn't know what to say, and for you to educate the world on what to say when you don't know, when people are different, when you don't understand, you just gotta read the shit, right? But how can we love each other, like your mom said? How can we embrace change? I am excited for your book. I am excited that you have become a world icon. I'm excited that you become a fashion icon. Got my hair dyed like you. Everybody like Raquel.
just seeing who that little girl was when I put on her makeup in 2008, shine, inspire people like me, other trans people, other queer people. I just want to acknowledge, I have no questions for you.
Sabotage, you got me crying. Thank you.
Oh, she got it, she got it.
No, she was like, her beauty campaign, but not anymore.
No, girl, that mug is always hot. FaceTime, never declines, but I'll make sure of that. All right, your question? Hello, what's your name?
Hi, Angelica, my name is Kayla.
Nikayla. And what's your question, Nikayla?
Question for Raquel. How did you come up with the title of your book?
Mm.
And I want to say that I am so proud of you. I've known Raquel for a while. We used to work together. I'm a Georgia Beach also. I just want to say, as a beautiful friend from myself, that it's beautiful to be.
Yes, sister. Yeah.
It's from a poem, and the day came when the risks were laying tight in the bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom as the original version. But I first heard it on an Alicia Keys album in my freshman year when the Element of Freedom came out, and it's like at the top of it. She put a stake on it, and you know, that was the title, just stay with me. Because even at that time, like, I felt like I was on some journey. I didn't know what was about to happen, but it felt like something was about to happen. And Nikayla is such a powerful leader here in Atlanta, y'all.
That's right.
Yes. Thank you so much.
We met during the internship at Solutions Not Punishments Collaborative, which was where I met Tony Michelle and of course Miss Dee. And that has been such a powerful experience that I carry with me. So thank you, Nikayla, for holding things down and just being a powerful leader, because you've been on a journey too.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Got one more question here. What is your name?
Hi, my name is MC.
MC, hi MC.
Wait, y'all planned this because y'all are all from different sections. I love it.
Right, this is part what, 3?
I understand a lot of you guys are talking about equity in your questioning and even in your conversations and demanding it, even though you in there, Miss Angelica, like hearing from you being like, hey, I know this is something that I've worked hard for and deserve. And going forward, I have been thinking about in the spaces that I've occupied and being able to bring people in those spaces. And sometimes and recently I realized that we don't necessarily always hold the community that we're a part of in the same accountability that we know that are directly affecting us. And so I just wanted to know, like, something that you expect, or that you would like to see from particularly Black queer men like myself, or it's just our community in general, but definitely a space that you have like heavily contributed to. We don't always feel the same reciprocation.
Wow. Thank you for that question.
I think what I want Black folks specifically to know is that you're being felt by these restrictions too. So when I think about Black cis men, queer, straight, whatever, you're never gonna be man enough in this society, in this white supremacist society, because you will never be able to live up to those ideals set for you. And that's what we have in common. So let's own that together. And similarly, when there are Black cis women who think that Black trans women are trying to take their spot, no, honey. I love you in your spot, and I want you to get your 10s. You deserve your 10s, and I deserve mine too. but you will never be able to live up either to these ideals around womanhood in a white supremacist society. So let's figure out what we're gonna do with that. Can we own that by being Black, we are inherently gender nonconforming? Can we own that all the things that make us fly and poetic and beautiful is because of that, what makes us other? But then that isn't really just the Black community, because white folks, y'all are inherently gender nonconforming too. Because these ideals that you think you live up to are just that, just concepts, you know, from this Western environment. So I think it's important for us to all understand that the systems stacked against us are literally stacked against all of us. They are, we talk about intersections for a reason, because they're all kind of latticed onto each other. And the way forward is understanding that gender liberation is something we can all tap into. So maybe instead of being fearful of the next person, figure out what you can learn from them, figure out how to tap into that empathy that I think, especially in Western culture and in the United States, we're being told to strip away from ourselves. So that's what I would want folks to kind of start understanding, because I think then the action items start to fall into place. But if we just do the action items and we don't actually change our perspective, we're gonna lead right back into the same issue.
Give it up for that answer.
Yes, well, we are, you know, we're gonna be in with one of the things I want to have you, I want to set you up here with just some words for, because you and I, we have witnessed so many of our trans siblings not get the chance to fully blossom and to fully bloom. And Eckhart Tolle talks about, I think in his book, I want to say A New Earth, I think it is, he talks about in the beginning chapter about how the earth was not yet an environment that was conducive to the lifespan of a flower. And that flowers were here for a short amount of time and then dying off because the environment was just not ready for them. What words do you have for those who have gone but are still here with us? As well as those who are in current circumstances and environments where it's getting very risky to blossom. What words of encouragement can you give them from your story?
I want to give love to Eckhart, of course. I also want to give love to Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
When I think about The Bluest Eye, and I use this excerpt about, you know, there was this summer where the marigolds didn't bloom because the earth wasn't habitable for certain types of flowers. I use that at the top of a letter that I write to China Gibson, a Black trans woman who was murdered in Louisiana in 2017. And her story really stuck with me because she was murdered, but she was from the South. She actually had ties to Atlanta because we knew her as the dancing doll, and so she had performed at the Jungle, which was the first gay club I ever went to. And I never got to meet her, but that time when she passed, I read this article, and this journalist was talking about how she was prepping for bottom surgery. And we were slated to have bottom surgery around the same time. And so I just thought about how I was accomplishing this thing, and she wasn't here to do that. So I wanted to give her love, because she's one of those North Stars for me, and kind of making sure that my work speaks directly to the Black trans experience and why that is important. But I would say that the folks we've lost too soon, we have a duty to keep their spirit alive, as cliche as that sounds. And I think tragedy and struggle doesn't have to be the stopping point. You know, we need to feel whatever we need to feel and move through it. But the point that I'm making, the epilogue, is that we can use that as fertilizer to build the world that they deserve. And that's what I try and do. And I hope, you know, we can plant some seeds so we can leave the soil richer for the ones to come.
Well, thank you for planting those seeds. Everyone, give it up for, Willis. Make sure that you go with the, you don't have it already. Slow readers.
Get in the signing line, if you already have your book, that's on the left-hand side of the table. If you don't have your book yet, you would like to purchase one, you're gonna get on the right-hand side of the table. We're gonna let the table walk out, we'll get at the table, and then our line.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I got it. Okay.
Where's the timeline? Oh. Oh, so proud. Always so.
I know, so nice to meet you.
Sounds like it. I know. And I
Y'all well, all over the world.
of course, I love it.
Of course, that's what the average is. Interview right here today.
My sorority cousin. One about how you class makes, right? Yeah. He claimed that. Hey, sister.